Some of you know that I ran the Ultra-Trail Snowdonia 25K last year, and you also know that I got a medal at the end, but it was a DNF because I missed the cutoff. I'm going back to do it again this year, so I wanted to go through some of the things that I've learned from last year, kind of the mistakes I've made, which will be 3 of them that I want to cover, and then also what went well last year that I kind of want to repeat again. So this video is going to be about my plan to run the UTS 25 this year, and kind of just how I'm going to not DNF again. So one of the biggest mistakes from last year is that I realised after, not even during the race, I think it was afterwards that I realised I haven't been fueling enough, even though I know how important it is to fuel properly when you do long runs. So when I was doing marathon training and half marathon trainings, I make sure I fuel enough. So I have an alert set on my watch to tell me when to fuel, which is every half an hour. But I find that with the watch I have, the Garmin, it kind of was a bit temperamental. So sometimes it would let me know every half an hour, and then sometimes it kind of wouldn't. So it's a bit kind of hit and miss with the watch. I know I can't just blame the watch for me making sure that I fuel, but at the time I was kind of relying on the watch to remind me to fuel, but that didn't really happen. So I feel like one of the mistakes is I just didn't fuel enough. And when you think about running 5-6 hours, or even just walking for 5-6 hours, you kind of burn a lot of energy and a lot of calories, and if you don't replenish them, you're just going to be tired even if you're not running. And I felt like a lot of the time I wasn't when I was doing the UTS last year. So fueling was definitely a big thing and a big mistake running last year, because even though I was very tired, my muscles were tired, but I felt like if I actually ate more, I probably could have run a bit more towards the end after climbing the big mountain and then another little mountain kind of during the second half. I feel like if I didn't run out of energy, I probably could have made the cut off, but towards the end I was just walking. I was just struggling to walk, and I think that's because I wasn't fueling properly. So one of the reasons was because my watch wasn't telling me to. The other reason is because my hydration vest at the time I was wearing, which is the Harrier 5 litre, the Harrier Kerber 5 litre, it wasn't enough, and I mentioned it in one of my last videos about getting a different vest. The pockets weren't very accessible, so I felt like I had a lot of fuel stuffed where I could, that I could access, but also fuel that I had at the back that I couldn't access easily. That was one of the reasons why I ended up just not eating, because I couldn't reach, and the poles that I was holding were kind of in the way. I got them out to use to when I was struggling up the mountain, and then I just couldn't put them back without having to take the vest off, so I ended up holding my poles and I couldn't access the fuel on the back of my vest. So I ended up just, not fueling. I made sure I drank enough because it was such a hot day. So I was hydrated enough, I think. But fueling wise, I just wasn't eating enough, and that really affected how the second half of the run went. So that was one of the biggest mistakes, I think, during the UTS last year. The other mistake I made was because I'm so used to road running, I didn't research enough into what it was going to be like doing a trail run. I've done a 15k trail run before that, and even that was very tiring, and I did kind of train for a little bit, but I didn't do enough research to the Ultra Trail in Snowdonia. I didn't realise how steep and big the mountain was going to be. So it was my bad that I didn't actually look into it enough. And I think because it was quite a new race in terms of the 25k distance, I know they've got the longer distances and that's been going on for a bit longer, but the 25k distance was quite new. And for some reason I thought, oh, it's 25k, I can run a marathon, so the distance is fine. But I didn't realise just how difficult the terrain was, and I should have researched it a little bit more and kind of tailored my training more towards how steep the mountain was going to be. So yeah, definitely research into the race that you're getting yourself into. Road races are so different to trail races, and I've definitely learned that during the UTS last year. And another thing I'm going to just tag on to this mistake is because I was injured, so I wasn't able to train properly. I felt like if I was able to train the distance more leading up to the race, it probably wouldn't have been as much of a struggle. But because I couldn't really run that well, and like I say, I was injured, so I think that played a big part of it. And then I kind of was in my mind a bit too overconfident, I guess, that I could cover the distance, so I went for it, and then I kind of it didn't work out that way. So definitely research into what you're getting yourself into. And the third mistake I wanted to cover is, even though I knew it was a mountain and I know it was going to be a lot of climbing, I trained for kind of uphills a bit, not enough. That's definitely a mistake. But I feel like the most significant mistake in terms of hill training was running downhill and training downhill. I feel like your quads and your knees, when they're not used to running downhill that much and that it's such a steep angle, they do really struggle, and that's what happened to me. I felt like running uphill was really hard and really challenging, and I thought that was going to be the hardest bit. So as soon as we started climbing Snowdon, I thought, oh, this is the worst bit. And once I got to the top, I thought that was the worst bit, that's done. And I thought everything else afterwards is going to be easy. I'm going to make it within the cut-off and I'm going to cross the finish line smiling, and then it will all be good. But of course it didn't happen. I got to the top and I felt like the challenge started when I got to the top. Once I looked down the other side of the mountain, I saw how steep it was coming back down the other side. I thought this is going to be really hard. At first, I looked at how steep it was and I thought I was going to slip and fall over because it was so steep. I had to be on my hands to kind of climb down and help myself down so I don't fall over. But also my quads and my knees really felt it. I think even within the first 5 minutes coming down the other side of Snowdon, I really felt my knees going. I really underestimated how difficult it was coming back down the other side of Snowdon, and I think other than the other two mistakes, I feel like this was definitely a very, very big one that I just didn't know. But I also thought, now that I've done it and I can learn from it, but before I actually ran the race, I kind of wouldn't have known. But again, I think I just haven't researched it enough, and I've not really heard many others kind of say about the downhill so much. So I didn't really put a lot of emphasis on downhill training is just as important. So those are the 3 mistakes that I've made, which is make sure that I fuel enough. That's what I'm definitely going to do this time. I'm going to I don't need to research because I've done it last year, so I already kind of know what to expect. But if you haven't done it, definitely do some research. And 3, train uphill as well as downhill, and definitely train for the terrain that you're going to run. So I now just want to talk about some of the things that actually went well. Despite me saying I've made a lot of mistakes and I missed the cut-off, there were a few things that actually went quite well, and I'm glad I was prepared in that regard. So the first thing is hydration. It was a really hot sunny day, really unexpectedly hot for May. It was just really warm, so leading up to it, even the week before, I made sure I was drinking enough, and every day I was taking electrolytes as well. And the morning of the race I had electrolyte, and I also took electrolyte with me during the race so I could top it up as I was topping up water, and that was so important, and I think that made such a big difference. Even if it wasn't a hot day during a long run like that, I feel like you just need to hydrate enough. But it was a really warm day, so I'm glad that I actually hydrated enough. So that's definitely something that went well. And because it was a really warm day, what went well was I had a lot of sun cream on me, so that really helped. Sunglasses and visors. I don't really like wearing visors when it's sunny out when I go running normally, so usually sunglasses is enough for me. But I'm so glad that I had a visor just to cover my forehead and kind of around my neck and just my face. I felt like that made such a big difference, just being out in the sun all day climbing the mountain. That wasn't something that I necessarily thought would make such a big difference, but it really did. So I'm glad I protected myself from the sun that was out and all the UV kind of on the day. It was just so hot, so I'm really glad of those things that I took with me. So that worked really well. And the third thing I learned during that race is I never thought poles were going to make such a big difference. I didn't even think that I needed them necessarily. I thought because I had them, I was going to take them with me. But climbing that mountain really made a difference, having poles, just helping myself up kind of rocks and the steep inclines. I just never thought poles were going to make such a big difference. And the other thing that made a lot of difference with poles was, again, coming back down the other side, just helping myself, just to help lower myself down the other side, because my knees were so battered and my quads, the muscles on my quads just gave up. So I felt like the poles really helped me come back down the other side of Snowdon. So definitely have poles with you. Even if you don't use them, I feel like you never know when you might need them, and to me it made a huge difference. I think I would have been a lot slower without the poles. The fourth thing is trail shoes that I thought went quite well. I've not really tried different trail shoes, and I've only got the one pair which I bought specifically for that race, because I wasn't sure if trail running is going to be something that I want to do all the time, so I didn't want to spend loads of money on a pair of trail shoes that I might not actually use that often. So I got a pair from Asics, and they were on offer, and I thought, oh, I'll just get a pair that's comfortable enough for me to run in, that isn't going to cost too much. But they worked really well, and I think because it was a dry run, it wasn't raining or muddy, not too muddy, there were boggy bits, but it wasn't like a muddy race overall. So the grip was good. I think it's very important if you're going to do a race that's going to be muddy and wet potentially, that you don't slip and slide because you could hurt yourself. I'm lucky that I got shoes that were okay and the weather was good. So for me, the shoes worked quite well. So that's another thing that went well last year, and I'll be wearing the same shoes again this year because they worked. I might regret it if it's really wet this time, but we'll see. So those are the shoes I'm going to wear this time, and yeah, I'm glad they worked out last time. The other thing is my Salomon race belt that I had with me. I mentioned before that the vest I wore just didn't have enough accessible pockets, so I was really grateful that I actually took the initiative and thought I'll bring my race belt just in case. I'm so glad I did, because without that a lot of the stuff I needed wasn't going to be accessible, including my GoPro, and I had a pack of jelly babies that I couldn't put back in my hydration vest, so I was so glad I had the belt that I could just stuff it in and not hold it the whole time, because I was already holding the poles the whole time pretty much. And yeah, I'm so glad that I got the race belt. If you do have a smaller hydration vest, or you just need some more accessible pockets, I think a race belt is a really good idea. That worked really well for me, and I'm glad I had that. So that's another thing that went well. So those are some of the things I learned from the last UTS 25K, and what I'm going to do differently next year, and also things that went well. Hopefully you found it useful. I'll be making some other videos on kind of my training, mandatory kit, and kind of general update on how I'm getting on. And obviously I'll be sharing the race day video with you as well. So hopefully for those of you who have signed up and it's going to be your first UTS, that is going to be somewhat helpful, or hopefully this kind of encourages you to think about entering in the future, because it's a really good race and I'm really excited to go back and do it again and do it within the cut-off this time. So thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions or if there's anything else you want me to cover, just let me know in the comments, and I will share that with you. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. My name's Uni. Bye.